Good afternoon. Are you tired? Yes. Me either. So, sorry for being late, but I don't have the ability to be in two places at the same time. It's coming, but still not working well. And what I am talking today is something that you know very well. Come on, the cardiac output determinants, so we know that very well. Okay. So if you think that you know that, please go in a bar and drink a nice beer for me. How should we go back to the... Okay. If we are looking for the determinants of the cardiac output, that means that probably we think that these determinants might be potential targets for our strategy to be manipulated and then to get a chance to improve the flow for peripheral tissue, for anything else. The flow itself alone is probably not sufficient to make a decision. And you can see here that you need the information on your tool or your device about the determinants, at least the most important one, some related to the pump function, some related to the circuit function. And since this flow is an adaptive variables, you should know what happens when you manipulate these determinants of flow, so that is why the trends might be very important to get in your machine, even if it's not a sophisticated one. You see here, you have the trend, which are very well visible for the nurses and the doctors. You have big numbers, as you can have in all the monitoring system now, and you have something which might be portable to go to the OR, to go to the CT scan or whatever, and then you can get some parameters in addition which may tell you what happens for the cardiac efficiency or the coupling between the cardiac function and the vascular bed. Then some very basic concept that we should remember, and that this concept has been forgotten most of the time, and then this is the basement of the recent trials looking at the adequate blood pressure we should reach to resuscitate well our patients. So finally the pressure might be an issue because you have two types of organ perfusion. One is auto-regulated and the other one is not. What does it mean? Auto-regulated means that the flow does not change during the pressure variation, the perfusion pressure variation. Everybody knows that, except that when we give norepinephrine, we suspect that we increase the pressure to perfuse the organ, which is by definition, in your mind, not auto-regulated circulation. Since we don't know what's going on at the local level for the regional circulation, if, for example, the brain blood flow. What happens to the brain blood flow when you have an acute inflammation? Are you still able to be sure that the brain circulation is auto-regulated? Nobody knows. If you get a brain injury, how do you know that this brain injury is still auto-regulated, at least in some part of the brain, versus the peripheral circulation? So in other words, the relation between the cardiac output and the regional blood flow might be more complex than we expected initially. For the other circulations, which are supposed to be non-auto-regulated, the skin blood flow, the skeletal muscle, maybe the splanchnic one, then you know that the more elevated is the pressure, the higher will be the regional blood flow. Even the cardiac output is not so high. So you can change the partition of perfusion according to the physiological status of the regional circulation. Then you see here, very classic view, you have here the pressure, the perfusion pressure, here the flow. The flow is auto-regulated despite variation in perfusion pressure. That's classic. That means that if you increase the pressure and the flow does not change, you are changing the vascular tone. You constrict. You decrease the perfusion pressure, you maintain the flow, that means you dilate. So in other words, for this particular organ, it's depending on the vascular tone more than anything else. For the others, you know, it's clear, simple. The more elevated is the pressure, the more is the regional blood flow. Fine. Then, what means cardiac output if you measure this? First of all, there is no normal cardiac output, as you know. There is an adapted cardiac output to the needs, the determinants. So that is why the determinants are important to get. Cardiac output is not related to the regional blood flow, but for some it is. For example, if I'm asking to the residents, what do you think about the cardiac output increase in these patients? Is it good for the renal perfusion, the renal blood flow? Is it good for the liver blood flow? Is it good for the brain blood flow? Or maybe brain blood flow increase might be worse for the patient, so you have to make a strategy for that. And that's something that we don't know yet, but we should know in the future. Then having the trends and the contextual relationship, you can define better how you would like to use the cardiac output monitoring, not only to get a value, but to understand how you perfuse these injured organs. Then if you look at the major determinants of cardiac output, you see you have a lot of them. The first one is the amount of blood coming back to the heart, so the pump can pump. But if you have nothing to pump, you cannot generate flow. And this is an important issue from Mr. Guyton. The other one, which is very important, of course, is the cardiac function. And remember that you have two pumps. And then the right one is suffering a lot. In the acute situation, especially during mechanical ventilation, we increase the afterload of the right side. The inflammation is increasing the pulmonary pressure and decreasing the arterial pressure, so you increase the afterload of the right side. You give fluid because you resuscitate the hypovolemic status, so you are increasing the load, the preload of the right side. So all of this are challenging the right ventricular cardiac function. Then, saying that, which is very classic, and thank you, Shelley, for giving me this slide, so there is no left pump success without a right pump success. And that's the major point you should remember. And the left is the left and the right is the right. Then if you move to the other determinant of this cardiac output value, it has to fulfill, to fit well with the oxygen requirements. And this was classic 10 or 15 years ago. We got the same room full of people interested to know what's going on for the DO2-VO2 relationship, which is not anymore so sexy, if I understand. Nobody speaks too much about that. But it's still an issue. And you see here you have the VO2, which is covered by the flow. You reduce the flow or the oxygen delivery, so you extract more just to cover and to maintain the oxygen consumption. If you are reaching a threshold here, you don't give enough, and then the oxygen consumption starts to decrease when you reduce the delivery of oxygen. So everybody knows that with the critical values around this need. Then, if you increase the oxygen consumption, you have a higher level of oxygen consumption, but you see at the same time that you shift the threshold at which the oxygen consumption becomes dependent of the oxygen delivery. And that's might be an important determinant to remember when you are doing this flow variations with the therapeutic issues. Then there is fortunately some protection, and this is a slide from Paul Shoemaker and Jacques Duranteau, showing some years ago, many years ago I would say, that we have some concept of conformance. Conformance means that if you need oxygen, you don't bring enough oxygen to your need, you regulate your need and you decrease your need. Like you do with your banker. You are asking for more money, you don't have the money enough, you reduce the expenses every month. And that makes sense. Accuracy, we spoke about this before, I don't have time to go through, but We said many times, we don't care about the accuracy. I disagree with this. Accuracy is not a paranoid attitude. It's because based on the value of flow, you divide the pressure by the flow, and then you are looking for some kind of vascular tone. If it's slow, you give presses. If it's normal, you don't give anything. If it's high, you give dilatators. So finally, based on this ratio, you do mentally, or your machine is doing for you, you can make a decision which might be really the inverse, depending on the quality of the measurements you have. So accuracy is an issue. So usually the doctors are not reacting to the blood, to the blood flow, to the cardiac output. Nobody is really saying, oh, the blood flow goes down, I should do something. You are reacting because, maybe you disagree, you can raise your hand if you disagree with me, because you have hypotension, right? The alarm is hypotension, right? Are you agreeing? Yeah, okay, thank you. Then, the doctor sees that the pressure is lowish, he started to do something, and what he does, he gives fluid, right? You do that? Don't say no, because I know it's yes. Then, the assumption you make is to say, I give volume because the volume will increase the blood flow. In other words, the amount of liquid I give is transformed in flow, and then the flow goes up, and then I get a higher blood pressure. That's the assumption you do. You agree with? Unfortunately, it doesn't work, or very rarely it works like this. Because you have to make a lot of assumptions. First of all, you have to be sure that the volume you give is well pumped by the right and the left ventricle. You know or you don't know, depending on your assessment you did before. Then you have to make the assumption that the volume you give is really transformed to flow. Depends on the venous compliance. If it's hypovolemic, you feel, and then you don't circulate, you feel more than circulate. If the compliance is reduced, the liquid you give is circulating because it's filled yet. And that's an important issue that we don't care for the moment, but this is very essential to know if the volume we give will increase the cardiac output or not. And then at the end of the day, if you are moving up the flow, what happens for the pressure? You remember, you have some auto-regulated circulation and non-auto-regulated circulation. So finally, it's difficult to predict. In addition to that, in acutely inflamed patients, the vessels are not reacting normally. So finally, you get a bump for pressure, you get a higher flow, but still, you are hypotensive. Do you agree with? Uh-huh. Do you agree with? Uh-huh. In other words, you give fluid to the patients and always you correct hypotension, I don't trust you. Because usually what you do, you say, okay, I give fluid, the flow goes up, the pressure is lowish, I give presence. No? Hello? You don't give presence? Who is not giving presence? You are lying, my friends. Okay, you give the volume, or the volume and the flow are not simply related. Do you know that? The volume you give, 500 cc, rapidly given to a patient, you generate 5 liters of cardiac output increase. For the others, you give the same amount of fluid, and you generate 1 liter of flow. And for others, you don't generate anything else. Or you say, yeah, okay, but the pump is sick. You look at the pump, it seems to be okay. It's too complex, so let's go and give another one and see what happens. Do you agree with? Okay, you don't want to agree with me. Here is a guy from Sri Lanka. Thank you, Sri Lanka, for helping us to understand something. Here is a Here the guy is 135 kilos. And then he has a flow, the cardiac output 5.6. We do the CVVA, the scuff. And then in 36 hours after, he got 77 kilos. He lost 65 kilos. 65 kilos in 36 hours. Without any cardiovascular support. the flow moved from 5.6 to 5.3. Are you convinced that the blood volume and the volume globally is not easily related to the flow? Are you? Hello? They are not. You should be. Then, if you look at the determinants of the cardiac output, you know this one very well, you know. Everybody says the cardiologist essentially, the cardiac output is the stroke volume times heart rate. No. Mathematically, yes. Physiologically, no. To get this true, that means that the sympathetic nervous system has to link the peripheral vasculature to the heart pumping function. Then you move forward the blood to the heart, and the heart is pumping more. Together it is true, but you never know if it's true together when you have a sick patient. The point I'd like to make before conclusion is this one. Blood flow is the volume divided by time. You agree with? Do you agree with?
Yes.
Thank you. So, to increase this cardiac output value, you can increase the volume, what you do when you give volume, or you can reduce the time for circulation. When you are using dopamine, adrenaline, norepinephrine, what you do, you don't give any penny or cc's of volume. And then you see the flow goes up. By which way? The cardiologist tells you it's because the heart rate goes up, then the flow goes up. No. If you are doing a pacemaker, you increase the rate of the pacemaker from 65 to 80, the flow goes down. Because you have to link the venous region to the heart function. Then, is this only conceptually true, or you have some example for that? For example, here you give fluid, fine. Here you give some vasopressors. If you look at the arteriovenous fistulae, the chronic kidney disease, you have a high flow and a small blood volume. Then the time for circulation is short because of the fistula. If you move to the septic patients or the acutely inflamed, everybody said that the peripheral shunts are still open. And that's true. The blood flows more rapidly from the left to the right, then the time is going to be reduced, and then the flow goes up. And then you don't change anything else. You don't give any fluid. And that's a real issue that we should consider. Here in a very old paper, I was brilliant at this time, before becoming a very old and cachectic guy. Now you see, in this situation, we were with a PEEP level, and we tested two different means to improve the cardiac output. One was the increase in the volume to the heart with a G-suit. You shift the blood in the venous side to the central compartment. And the other one is dopamine. And dopamine is something which is not fluid. It's just shortening the time for circulation. And you can reach the same level of cardiac output, but they don't have the same mechanisms to be increased. Is there any situation clinically relevant for this? Yes, of course. For example, if you are looking for severe ketoacidotic patients, if you measure the flow, they are really hypovolemic, dehydrated, acidotic, really bad. But the cardiac output in average here was 10 liters per minute. And the more the fluid you give, and the more insulin you give, the less will be the blood flow. You give volume and the flow goes down. Are you serious, Didier? Yes, I am. And you see the oxygen consumption is high, and you get the heart rate is high, the salt volume is more than good, so it exists because of the short mean transit time for the time of circulation. Then the last point is the change in pressure and the vascular tone. You remember auto-regulated and non-auto-regulated circulation. You remember this? So, in the circulation where the pressure is not playing any role, In the circulation where the pressure is not playing any role, the flow is depending on the vascular tone. So each time you do something with vasopressors, you don't know if you are changing the vascular tone in this circulation or not. And this is a key issue to know, because sometimes we do well for the global parameters, but we do bad for the regional circulation and perfusion. And that's a key point to remember. And then the last but not the least, how the heart and the peripheral circulation are linked together. We call this the ventricular arterial coupling. And you see, this is a very important issue. Like for your banker or your employer, the more you work for the smallest salary possible, the better you will be recruited. Do you understand that? Your chief in the hospital is getting a position with a huge work and a small salary. That's great for him. He's a good cardiovascular doctor. Here that means that if you have this elastance, which is the relation between the stroke volume and the mean arterial pressure, you see here, you reduce the elastance from this level to this level. It means decrease elastance, increase compliance, more elastic, less energy to generate the same ejection. And that's very good. You eject well, but you pay less. That's very essential. This is the reduction in the elastance, which is nice. And the other side, for the elderly people, for example, especially if you give presses, you have the inverse. You increase the elastance, so you reduce the compliance. That means that the heart, to inject the same amount of volume, has to spend more energy. And the guy who is spending the most energy is the guy who has the more sicker cardiac function. So finally, to conclude, cardiac output, ladies and gentlemen, is an integrated variables. It has to be adapted to the determinants. It's a warning parameter before, largely before, the blood pressure may change. So measuring this before the blood pressure might be very helpful to be proactive. It gives information on the pump, right and left, on the circuit. It has to be acutely measured because you avoid the misinterpretation for the vascular tone, for the volemia, and the time response for this. The tool you would like to use is to be adapted with the medical problem you face. Thank you very much for your attention.